Good evening. Good evening. Okay. Welcome. This is the March 27th, 2025 special Northampton School Committee budget meeting. I'm Jean Louise Shara, Chair of the School Committee, and I'll
Recording
be
in progress.
presiding this evening. This meeting is being held remotely on Zoom pursuant to modification of the state's open meeting law for the pandemic and in person here at the JFK Middle School in the community room. And this meeting and all participating will be audio and video recorded. And we'll call the meeting to order, and I'll begin by asking Cassie to please call the roll of the school committee.
Mayor Shara.
Present.
Member Gacy.
Present.
Member Weissenfreund.
Present.
Member Seraphy Cox.
On Zoom.
Present.
Member Stein. Member Hennessy.
Present.
Member Miller.
Present.
Member LaBounty.
Present.
Member Agna.
Present.
Member Davis.
Present.
There's a quorum.
Great, thank you. So there's been a request to move up the scholarship and the gift of scoreboards before we do kind of get into the budget and do the hearing on the budget. So is there any objection to moving those two up? Okay, seeing none. First, can we take, is there a motion and a second to, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the scholarship fund, to approve the creation, I guess? This would be a new scholarship fund?
Bobby has to back up.
Okay.
So she'll share.
Okay, new scholarship fund for Coach Keck. Is there a motion?
So moved. A second.
Motion's made by Member Hennessy, seconded by Member LaBounty. And, hi, Bobby. Good evening.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't really have a lot to say about this. It's just a scholarship that was started by his daughter for exceptional young women in basketball. And it would be to give a scholarship to honor a young woman who demonstrates outstanding athletic ability coupled with unwavering integrity, leadership, and a commitment to uplifting her community and team. And it is an expendable trust, so it would be a minimum of $500 per year awarded.
Great, thank you. Any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none. Roll call, please, Cassie.
Member Gacy.
Yes.
Member Weissenfreund.
Yes.
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox.
Yes.
Member Hennessy.
Yes.
Member Miller.
Yes.
Member LaBounty.
Yes.
Member Agna.
Yes.
Member Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Shara.
Yes. Great, that passes. Thank you very much for that. And next is a vote to accept a gift of scoreboards and poles for softball and baseball from the Northampton Athletic Booster Club in the amount of $12,301.69. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I second it.
Motion's made by Member Weisenfreud, seconded by Member Agna. And discussion, Member LaBounty, did you want to speak to this, or is there someone here to speak to it?
Actually, John Fry is.
Oh, great, okay. Whoops, hold on. Now I can't find him. Where'd he go? Here we go. Okay. John Fry, whose name says Gus Fry, but
Sorry, that's my son's name on here. Yes, I'm part of the Northampton Athletic Booster Club. We've revised the club again this year. We're looking to invest in a few projects, and this is one need that we've seen from the teams. So we'd love to put in some scoreboards. I would make one note on the request that this will be the boards will be installed, fully installed from the Booster Club.
got it. Great. Thank you. Any questions or comments for John? Okay, seeing none, is there a roll call, please, on accepting the gift?
Was there a motion?
Yeah.
There was.
Yes.
Oh, I was sharing. Okay, sorry.
Do you need to know who made it?
I can go back to the
It
tape.
was member Weisenford and seconded by member Agna.
Oh, sorry, who's second?
Member Agna.
So sorry. Member Weisenfreund?
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox?
Yes.
Member Hennessy?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member LaBounty?
Yes.
Member Agna?
Yes.
Member Davis?
Yes.
Mayor Shara?
Yes.
Member Gazy?
Yes.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you, and thank you so much for that gift.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Did you get you know what name that was?
I didn't catch it.
Okay.
So someone got to it before I did.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the discussion on the budget and the hearing. And, sorry, I'm getting back to my notes. So we'll consider the proposed FY26 budget, which is available for inspection on the MPS website at www.northamptonschools.org and at the Office of the Superintendent at 212 Main Street, room 200, in Northampton between the hours of 8 and 4 p.m. And we will begin with comments. We're taking them in person and over Zoom. I've got the sign-up sheet, thank you, from Cassie. And for those on Zoom, if you wish to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature, and we'll alternate between those in the room and those who are on Zoom. You can always submit a written comment, which is equally part of the public record, at northampton-school-committee@northampton-k12.us, which will be sent to all school committee members. Before you begin, please state your name and your city or town for the public record. The school committee does not respond, as it's the public's time to speak. So while your comments should be directed to the school committee, you'll understand when we don't respond to them. And please limit your comment to 3 minutes, unless language interpretation or accommodations for a community disability have been requested, in which case the time limit is 6 minutes. And we will set a timer to ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to speak. You have no obligation to use the full time, but if you do, after the limit is reached, you'll be asked to please finish your sentence. Cassie, did we ever figure out the Zoom timer?
Yes, we have it. I let folks know. It's an app on Zoom.
Okay.
I
Sounds like we're not prepared to.
don't think we are.
Okay, let's just do it the old-fashioned way. First up is Benjamin Spencer.
Yeah, I'm not ready. I see it.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Benjamin Spencer, Northampton, Massachusetts. My wife and I raised our children here in Northampton. They attended Northampton Public Schools from Bridge Street School, JFK Middle School, to Northampton High School. Some years were better than others. Each of our children had their own challenges. Both of them had IEPs. I am here tonight to speak to you for the very first time. I'm here because I care about our schools. I'm here because I care about the city. I'm here because this is important to me. Quote, I am in the business of believing what I hear from students and parents and staff because there is no reason they would tell us something that isn't true, end quote. These words from my Ward 2 City School Committee member really resonated with me. This is exactly how I feel. I will take it one step further. I would apply this philosophy to everyone. The concerns we have heard from parents are real. The work being done by educators are real. Challenges of budgeting our schools and our city are real. I have seen the budget presentation multiple times. I believe the strategies that are being used are solid and smart. I believe the mayor, the finance director, the city council, and the school committee truly want to do what is best for our children. My question to the school committee is, how are you working to support our schools? There must be more to it than the budget. What else do you need to be working on? Does the curriculum need to be changed? Should there be a no phone policy in the classrooms? Do teachers need training that they aren't receiving? We have learned that there are students in the high school who can't read. What's the plan? Hiring reading teachers? Training teachers to teach reading? How can we address this problem now with the staff that we have? We need to acknowledge the problems, we need to find solutions, we need to get to work. I am not a political theorist, so I was excited to learn a new word recently that seemed relevant. Agonism. Agonism is a theory that emphasizes the positive aspects of certain forms of conflict. Agonists see conflict as a political good. An agonist would say that conflicts and confrontations, far from being a sign of imperfection, indicate that democracy is alive. Here's the most important part. Agonism implies a deep respect and concern for the other. Agonism is not simply the undifferentiated celebration of antagonism. We all know what antagonism is. On the school committee website, there are two important documents. One is the Massachusetts School Committee Code of Ethics. The other is the act relative to bullying and harassment. I suggest everyone take the time to read them. They are very clear. This is not a call for civility. It's not a call for cooperation. This is a call for agonism. Seeing your kids struggle in school is hard. Being a kid is hard. Being a parent is hard. Let's not make it harder on each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any hands online? So Lee Graham.
Hello, thank you. My name's Lee Graham. I live in Northampton. I wanted to talk about all of the public comments that you've heard over the last year about the crisis for students with disabilities in Northampton Public Schools. These comments are real and they are quite familiar. So many of them echo pleas from parents that I've heard over the decade that I've now lived here, some comments that even I have made in the record in the past. I agree with the perspective that we're hearing from parents that educational equity for students with disabilities and high needs students is not being met in Northampton now or for a long time. Where I struggle is with the focus on the current city and school leadership that they can fix these challenges alone. These are systemic inequities in our schools that long precede this administration. And if anything, our schools have seen a lot more city funds put in over the years since the pandemic compared to prior years under other mayors and other superintendents. I was an officer in the CPAC, the Special Education Parents Advisory Council, from 2018 to 2022. I much prefer writing to speaking, and I never delete my emails. So recently I was going through my inbox, really sort of reading through all of the communications I've had with the school committee and with the schools and other parents over the years. And here's just a few pullouts. In July 2018, Superintendent Provost stated at a school committee meeting that in anticipation of Northampton's audit coming up that year, achievement gaps had only grown between Latino students and other students since 2012, and that the district, quote, had yet to make progress on increasing access to honors and AP courses for high needs students. Multiple times over the years before the pandemic, the CPAC has had conversations about the long block model and how it potentially violates inclusion for some students with disabilities, reduces their elective choices compared to general education students, and that this is an unresolved issue in the Northampton Public Schools despite years of advocacy. In September 2021, there are notes about severe staffing shortages, including that this falls on the responsibility on the shoulders of special education teachers who are under a lot of pressure. There's all kinds of emails like this. I won't have time in 3 minutes to read them all. But what I'm really thinking about is that, we have these structural challenges in our district, in our city, and in our state. And the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act is a, quote, parentally enforced law, as a special education advocate once called it. And caregivers like myself, we hold everybody accountable. We start with ourselves, and we hold I'll finish my sentence.
Thank you.
School committee, union, administrators, elected officials, and community to prioritize educational equity for all students. And we need to think about what difficult choices we make together to build sustainable schools.
Thank
Not just about the money, but about how we spend it and who we value.
Thank you. Okay, Karen Hidalgo.
Karen
Do you
Hidalgo.
want us to lower it? That's very high.
How's that?
It's, I think
You can
it
hear
sounds
me.
fine.
Good.
It just, I don't want you to be uncomfortable.
Thanks. I'm Karen Hidalgo. I live in Ward 1 in Northampton. I'm a school counselor and department chair at Northampton High School and the parent of 2 high school students. And I'm speaking for myself, not on behalf of the school or department. I know that members of the school committee know this, but just for the benefit of the public, I wanted to be clear about that. Some of you may not have heard last year from me or from our previous principal, Bill Worley, that our high school is understaffed and has been for many years. We are understaffed compared with other schools in the district and compared with other area high schools. The only budget that begins to really address this is the DREAM budget for next year. Our current funding, with our current funding, we're very constrained by our schedule, by our staffing. In my experience, we're lacking an English teacher, a Spanish teacher, a life science teacher, a visual arts or ceramics teacher, a technology teacher, and more. We need back the social studies sections we lost to the English department last year. We're typically short a few sections in math each year as well. I know that some of these are addressed in versions of the budget and some are not. I love being part of the NHS community. There are so many talented, creative, and caring staff. We have students and families that are committed to our community, to the education of their own and other students. There are many ways it is a good place for students. But we really need to bring our staffing level up to the level of other schools in order to offer our students the education that they need and deserve, given the level of needs that they are coming to us with. You may be aware that for decades, Northampton Public Schools have been underfunded. There was evidence of this previously in the low staff salaries, low materials budgets, and the low high school staffing. We have seen significant increases to funding to NPS in the last couple of years, but it was not enough given the long-term underfunding. The increases so far have not yet addressed some of the longstanding and significant issues. Additional increases will be required and will need to be targeted to address these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brian Wilby.
Hello. I'm here to speak about the budget today. This is the public hearing, and I understand that you've been presented with 3 options for the budget for fiscal '26, and I'd like to just voice my support for the strong budget. And some of my thinking there is as follows: that just a few weeks ago, the school committee, voted to add additional funding this year, which was really a recognition that what we have right now is inadequate, that it's unsatisfactory. And so just by the process of elimination, that means level services continue to be, for next year, would be unsatisfactory, inadequate. The 4% budget would cut services, so that would be, even more unsatisfactory, inadequate. So really, the strong budget seems like the only option that is viable for us. And even within the strong budget, as I kind of looked at it in details, I was a little bit disappointed that certain positions were not added back. And I forgot to state my name in town.
Thank you.
Brian Wilby from Northampton. I have 3 kids in the school system, and 2 of them are at Ryan Road. And Ryan Road's been operating with half a librarian this year. They used to have a full-time librarian. Now they have a half librarian. And I was hoping in a strong budget that, we'd have a full librarian at Ryan Road School, but we don't. So that's just one example that we're experiencing in my family in terms of where maybe the strong budget doesn't go far enough. But I just wanted to voice my support for the strong budget tonight, and thank you all for your time and for your service.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Oh, yes, please.
Sorry, missed the sign up there. Hi, my name is Ronnie Gold, 15 Linden Street. And I come to you today as you continue to work on the upcoming budget, and I would like to share 3 suggestions or topics from my perspective as a parent, public school teacher, and former school committee member who has consistently watched your meetings this year and previously. These suggestions all center around paying close attention to the difference between messages and messaging. So first, at your last meeting and discussion in relation to the budget, the strategic plan was discussed. Mike and Emily led a discussion about concerns with how the strategic plan goals were written and formatted. And a lot of the conversation was pointed towards Dr. Bonner. I'd like to reiterate, make sure we all understand, this is not Dr. Bonner's strategic plan, it is our school's strategic plan. And this school committee had a chance to format, edit, and revise it as needed. And so any changes should be spoken of more in what you as a school committee can do rather than one person. And so I hope we take more of that perspective and ownership of the strategic plan and this budget process. Second, Mike, you're not here right now, but I wanted to share that at the last meeting I was compelled to come today to share how offensive your messaging is coming off as. And hopefully it could be called out by others here. Besides using point of order repeatedly and loudly to interject in the conversation, you actually said that you were going to call the superintendent's bluff. Mike, this is not a game. You're not competing with each other. You're on the same team. And I really hope that we take that approach in this work. Lastly, in your budget conversation, there's a lot of discussion about high needs, this high needs percentage and high needs percentage. Having taught in urban schools that are over 90% high needs for 20 years, something that is early in my career I learned that the high needs really does not refer to the students. It's the schools that have the high needs to figure out how to support students, right? Like it's not that the students have something beyond anyone can conceive of, it's that our schools are not necessarily designed to meet the needs of all kids. And yes, money is part of that solution, but any good educator knows it's not just money. Anyone who's in schools today knows it's not just a money thing. Money will not solve anything. There's plenty of data available for similar districts with similar high needs schools percentages to shed light on what maybe we could be doing differently or in new ways here in Northampton. And I trust in a teamwork approach where we're all supporting each other, we'll get there. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. The sign, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and speak. There's no one else on the sign-up sheet, yeah. So you're welcome to, go ahead. Okay.
Hi, everyone. And I'm using accommodations. In January, as you all know, I filed a complaint with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed because my child's IEP had been regularly violated throughout the school year up to that point. 2 weeks ago, as I told you last time, I read through an IEP transcript sent to Desi and to me where Matt left the transcription app, Matt Holloway, on after I had left. Given who was in the room when I left, it seems to include the Bridge Street principal, school adjustment counselor, and special education coordinator, some of them insulting me with profanity. I sent all of you the transcript excerpt. The principal does nothing to stop them. They also openly admit it's standard in this district to violate IEPs and that the district regularly lowballs services, not giving students what they need unless parents fight for it. The principal, again, doesn't disagree. The district is knowingly and willfully depriving students of a free and appropriate public education. That is about leadership, right? And this connects to the last speaker's comment, even if our views differ. I just got the findings back for my PRS complaint. They found that the district violated 6 different state education laws and that their actions constituted a denial of access to free and appropriate public education. So I'm not just making this up, yeah? And this isn't about a rogue employee. This is the principal allowing this to go on, encouraging this culture. She's still working here. Why wasn't she immediately placed on administrative leave? That should happen now. What about the school counselor responsible for students' well-being, who seems to be the one personally insulting me and using profanity on the transcript? Why isn't she on leave? But let me add, this is a problem with Bridge Street and Northampton Public School leadership. At the end of the transcript, one of the speakers says they will, quote, go to war end quote, with me, because I asked them to follow the law, provide accommodations, and because I filed a complaint. The very next school day after that meeting, my kid's full-time paraeducator disappeared. No one even told us it happened. No reason was ever given, despite me asking repeatedly. It seems to be clear retaliation. Who oversees services in this district? Only the principal or director of student services seemingly could have done that. Who oversees them? Our superintendent. Who shapes the culture and sets the tone? Our superintendent. Who yanked the override and forced the budget cuts that led to me being told that a para wasn't hired to comply with my kid's IEP for quote-unquote financial reasons? The mayor. The systematic violation of IEPs is a discrimination issue and a legal issue, but it is absolutely a budgetary failure, which is why I am here, and a leadership failure. As I said last time, level services means we will have more of this. We will have more endless violations of IEPs. I'm also here to demand an independent investigation into these comments, into likely retaliation, and into the toxic culture in this district. DESE can do this. Maybe the state AG's ADA office could do this. Finally, I looked at the budget slides. I looked over them very carefully. Bridge Street is still getting the shaft as the only Title I school. It has a similar total number of students to Jackson, albeit with poorer, browner students. Bridge right now has 2 specialists, reading and math interventionists. Jackson has 4.6 for the same number of students. Why does it have more than double? I'm not saying Jackson should have less. I'm saying Bridge needs more. There are literally 3 minimal slides about Bridge Street's needs in the slide deck, and 10 or 11 about each of the other elementary schools. This is the opposite of equity. Why are we demanding less for the school that already has less and needs more? It is the superintendent's job to make sure that all schools are in a position to get what they need. It is also your job. Not just the schools with more money, more able-bodied students, and more white children. This is exactly how institutional racism is maintained and reproduced. I really hope that we can find a new superintendent who can do their job fully, competently, and in a way that mitigates instead of reinforces institutional racism, ableism, and class discrimination. One who doesn't gut even a paltry mid-year appropriation on the way from JFK to the council chambers. Our schools need more, they need better. This kind of language is terrifying to me with a kid who has these people with power over my child every single day, saying they will go to war with me and my family and my child. I hope that whether you have children or nieces or nephews or just children you care about, you can understand how terrifying it is to see this person who works in this school responsible for special ed, whether it was the principal or the coordinator or the school counselor, saying they will, quote, go to war with me. Now, I sent you all this transcript 2 weeks ago. I never heard back from any of you. I would like to. I'd like to speak with you. I'd like there to be an independent investigation. As I said, I would like these people put on leave because so far I have heard nothing. There's no, I heard from the superintendent there will be an investigation. I asked for the recording. I was told there's no recording even though there's a transcript. Perhaps there's some misunderstanding about the software, but typically transcription software creates a recording. That's how it works. That's how Otter works, which is the most common of these softwares. So I would like some steps to be taken. I let you all know 2 weeks ago, I communicated with Dr. Bonner, with Matt Holloway. I'm still waiting. Why aren't these people on leave, saying they will go to wars, insulting me, using profanity? Yeah, does it make sense? That it's concerning? I hope so. I find it extremely concerning as a parent. I'm scared for my child's well-being, and I want your help, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, hi, Meg Robbins, Northampton. I want to thank Dr. Bonner for offering 3 budgets. And the strong budget is one that will do. It has gaps in it. It has no overlaps. It doesn't provide what we really need in order to get back to where we were. But it was a pleasure to be able to see that those options are there. What I hope with this group is that that wasn't just a tease. That it's not that you're going to now say, well, we put that out there and it's not possible. We'll have to choose something else because the something else doesn't work. I'm a grandparent, parent of children who've gone through this district, and a longtime public school teacher. And I know what happens when we stop taking care of our children in our schools. And I know what happens to our schools. And I'm pretty sure I know what the picture will be for Northampton as we have charter schools around us and other options for children to choose, because we can't offer them the kind of education that we should be, because that's what public education is about. Every year that we let that slide, every year that we say we don't have enough, when in fact we do, is one that we're just basically ringing a death knell towards our own city commitment towards beautifully educating the children here. As an educator, I know we always start with what's best for the children. What is it that the children need? And then we backwards plan from that. And I know that that's the job of the school committee as well, isn't it? To be able to say, what do we need in order to operate our schools? I believe it's part of the mission. And I'm not sure that that's happened, except maybe in that strong budget. Maybe that started with that conversation. And I'm hoping that in your discussion about passing a budget, you will be there for the children in passing what the children need in order to have an excellent education. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to add one more thing, which is I sometimes look at you, Mayor, and I think how difficult it must be to be the chair and the mayor. It must be an almost impossible situation to have to balance one thing and the other thing. And I know that your heart is here and your head is here, and they're mixed in two different places. But I also know that you're a mom, too. And I know that you'll do your very best to see that that strong budget is the one that actually gets approved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, Nathan C. on Zoom.
Hi, it's actually Nathan Chung. Sorry, I forgot to update my last name. Nathan Chung, Northampton resident. Thanks. Oh, sorry for blocking. I just want to quickly say something. I know this is basically, I guess, what one of the previous speakers called agonism. I just wanted to talk about the whole media appropriation process and how uncomfortable I felt. Because the way it came from the school committee in March, I believe it was March 12th or so, to the city council, it basically looked like asking for a blank check without any real plans. And I believe the sponsors of that order, that request for media appropriation, they had a month to prepare between February and March. So that made me really uncomfortable about why those kind of details are not laid out before we went to the city council. And, maybe we don't need to go into those. Maybe there was some issue with administration, communication issues and whatnot. But financial responsibility, making sure the schools adequately funded, also needs to go hand in hand with proper procedures. And also, the students' lives, they don't end when they leave the schools. We have to ensure the community as a whole, that's composed of parents and grandparents and everybody else, uncles, cousins, everybody gets to have a quality life in the city. So everything needs to come together. And what really concerned me, and I looked at the school committee policy DB, where it actually specifically lists the superintendent's responsibility coming with the specific budget and presenting it. And I felt like some of the school committee members unfairly attacked the superintendent for actually being specific, which is her responsibility as defined in the policy. And I would say if some school committee members are willing to go out of the norm and suggest the media appropriation, they should take the lead in actually coming up with something very concrete before it goes to the city council. Again, financial responsibility, considering the whole community, making sure everybody has a quality life, not just students, but everybody. I think this matters as a community, and we also got to follow proper procedures and careful responsibility, careful thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Lisa Modinos, Florence. I'm going to read a statement by Sam Hunter, who's on the school committee in East Hampton. These are his words. This came up briefly at school committee last night. I want to say that if you have a child receiving special education services, particularly out-of-district services, your kid is not the reason we're having trouble funding schools in this state. It's true that out-of-district special education tuitions and transportation went up by a lot in the last few years, and this has pushed districts that were previously just getting by into a very bad position. But it is not your child's fault, and the things they need are still important, and you are still right to advocate for them. There are legislative fixes that could be made to help districts account for these expenses when they're needed. It was very clear to me from attending the recent Ways and Means Committee hearing in Amherst that the legislators themselves don't fully understand this issue. I'll be doing my damnedest to try to educate them on it, but in the meantime, please know that your job as a parent of a disabled child is to advocate for your child to get that free and appropriate public education that they're entitled to, and our job as other members of your community is to push for legislative fixes so that your child isn't seen as a barrier to a balanced budget. And to all those parents out there who don't have a child who requires an out-of-district placement, your job is to remember that when conversations about extraordinary special education costs come up, there's an actual child at the center of it who is entitled to an education that will allow them to live a life where they can make meaningful choices, be cared for safely, have fulfilling relationships, and communicate about the things that are important to them. And it's our duty as a community to make sure we don't forget about them. That's the end of Sam's statement. I want to add that we can talk semantics all we want. As a mother of a high-needs child, special education and public education funding are highly important. We're not talking about schools and buildings and abstract conceptualizations of education. We're talking about children. So every dollar and every color on a graph is a child. Just a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you. Quaverly.
Hello, I think the co-host needs to unblock my video.
What that means? Does that work?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I wanted to greet you all tonight as you're about to do something very difficult and in some ways very awkward. And I think there's certainly probably no one in city government who gets to experience awkwardness at quite a level of intensity as maybe myself and maybe the mayor. You know, it's just not always easy to do our jobs. But I know that what comforts me, and I hope that what will comfort you as you embark on this budget hearing, is to remember that, you know, your duty and your job, your allegiance is really to your constituents. And in that sense, it's a very simple equation. You know, at the end of the day, for me, that always makes it a very simple equation, even when everything else can feel very complicated and awkward sometimes. So try to stay focused on the people that you serve and their needs. And also remember that the school committee is not the only department that is probably being told that there's not enough money to go around. That's no reason that you shouldn't advocate for what you truly need. I agree with all the speakers who said that it really has to be the strong budget because the level services is not adequate and certainly cuts are not adequate. I think when you look at a percentages increase for this department, it's difficult to think of it that way because it's been on such a roller coaster for so many years. You don't really have a very good base. You know, we're sort of trying to rehabilitate schools that are really deeply, chronically underfunded. So we need to think about what's best to do right now. And I also just wanted to say that although you were given a very hard time by the City Council about the specificity of your request, we often see requests from the mayor's office that don't have that level of specificity. For my taste, you did not do anything wrong by sending us a list. My only regret was that your superintendent did not ask for the full amount. But I am very heartened by the superintendent's remarks during the Budget and Property Committee, which seemed to indicate to me she will advocate for the strong budget. So I also want to close my remarks tonight with thanks to almost all of you for the tremendous growth that I have seen on the school committee. And I know that our community really, really appreciates your advocacy and your very hard work. Good night.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Seeing no one in the room. Okay, Mass Saborski. Hold should be able to unmute. There you go.
Hi. I just want to give everyone a quick reminder that at this time last year, we were told there was a deficit. We found out later there was an $11.6 million surplus. We could really fund our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Totally unorganized. Hello, I'm Deborah. I live in Florence.
Your last name?
Oh,
Sorry,
my
I
last
don't
name's
remember.
Thompson.
Thank you.
Sorry. So I look at Gaurav having to come back, and I look at this past year, and I want you guys to know from a parent perspective, it is not easy to get up here. It is not easy to violate our children's privacy for the sake of funding for the schools, like month after month. I mean, we've been here for, looking at the same faces for I don't know how long. This is about trust at this point. Like, we've been like airing our pain to you guys, and we haven't gotten a lot of responses. We've had to fight and advocate for the little bit that we've gotten back, which should have been there to begin with. With what happened with Gaurav 2 weeks ago, you know, there was an immediate email from the district that said, hey, it wasn't Matt Holloway. We're investigating, but like, we need a little more information. We need to know that you're taking that seriously. We need to know that that's not okay. And so I would request that people at the very least respond to Gaurav. I'm sorry, I'm like calling you out while you're sitting there. Or any of us who have been like literally pleading with you to do what is right. And when I look at the strong budget, that's not even enough. And I see this strong budget, and I appreciate this strong budget, but I kind of worry that the strong budget's there versus the 4% one, which is a ridiculous amount of cuts just to say, hey, we're compromising, to make people feel like we got something like this year. Doesn't feel like that. So we are in a situation where we don't trust that this district is looking out for our kids. I'm not saying you all specifically, but that's a horrible place to feel, and it's a horrible place to be, and it's awful to have to come back here. And also, when I look at the language in the budget, when we're talking ableism, like it's not a buzzword. It's like talking about how even with this budget, special needs programming or special education is so much that we're also going to have to lay off 28 teachers, or teachers are going to have to take a, 1%? I'm looking at you, Kate, but don't pitch special education as a separate need. It's all educational needs of the district. End of story. Yeah, we're legally obligated to meet some, and we all know we haven't met it. I mean, Gaurav's got it in writing. So, I mean, it's educational needs of the district. It's not special needs programming that has to go in there, right? It's all of our kids. Anyway, I'm babbling. All right, bye.
Thanks. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we will thank you everyone for your comments. We'll move on to discussion. And, okay. Oh wait, let me turn this off before it goes off. Dr. Bonner, I don't know if you wanted to, oh, what? I'm used to you sitting over there. It's very, I'm having a hard time adjusting.
What do you want me to do?
Did you want to lead off the discussion, or I can go to Member LeBounty, who has her hand raised?
Whatever you want to do.
Let's see. I know we don't. I kind of want to say, but
Can I move to take a 5-minute break?
Absolutely.
That's just, I feel like to get, or for us all to get our heads together and
Sure.
process what we just heard.
Yep, absolutely. 5 minutes, so. Yeah. 52 or so, okay.
Progress.
Okay, we are back. Thank you. And Dr. Bonner, were you going to lead off and then?
Yes, a couple of clarifying points, and I want to just get to this slide, which takes a look at the three reviews of the budget. So very, very briefly, I know that we normally do not respond to public comment, but
I don't, you could keep going, excuse me. I'm just going to see if we can make that sound stop.
Okay. But I do want to point out that in our school district, we have 4 Title I schools, not just one. That needs to be clear and clarified. I don't want that misinformation to be out there. The other thing is that we are investigating the serious nature of the incident that was, we were reminded of this evening from one of our caregivers. And there are due process rights, and there is a process in which we go through when it involves our personnel. And so we are in the process of the investigation, and once that investigation is complete, there will be a report, and then I will follow up. But as of right now, we are in the midst of it. And so that's all I can say at this point in time. And I know families want information right away, but I cannot speak to that when we are in the process of investigating. So on that note, I just wanted to share that with our community. So, can you say who's conducting the investigation? So we are beyond the public comment, and no, I won't. I cannot say that. I have to refer that to my attorney, to our counsel, Okay. So with that, we have 3 views of the budget. The 4%, the 7.7%, which is our level services, and the strong. Just want to remind you in terms of the level services, the level services budget is different from level funding. Level funding means that we will receive exactly what we are given in terms of appropriation this year. The level services budget considers increasing the wages of our staff, and that means COLA and STEP. It does not consider any other changes in any other monetary figures that may be in that budget. So just remember that. That's important. So that level service budget, we will be able to continue with our work towards reaching the goals of our district improvement plan. We will be able to restore some specialized programming. And then we will also be able to maintain all of the staffing that we currently have now, with the exception of what we just recently incurred with our mid-year appropriation. So then, the strong budget, and I just want to tell you and remind you, actually I don't have to tell you because I think you already know how this came to be and how it was developed. These are the requests that have come from our administrators in terms of looking at the needs that are in their building. And so from that, we have a 13.24% increase request. And it does capture some of the positions that were cut last year, but it also captures some new positions based upon the changing needs of our students. So I just want to point that out, and I'm just going to open it up to you all in terms of any clarifying questions that you may have and Bobby is also with us this evening via the Zoom. So.
Okay, thank you. Member LaBounty.
Thank you.
Can you hold the mic? Yeah, just.
Oh, sorry. One of the questions that I had was, after looking at the strategic plan and listening to the curriculum conversation that we had at the last meeting, it wasn't clear to me how the budgets were actually addressing those concerns. The phrase that really stuck with me was, we can't intervene our way out of this. And I know there is sort of there's
Can't intervene, I couldn't hear what you
Yeah, I
said.
couldn't.
can't intervene our way out of this.
Oh, uh-huh.
That's what they said. And I think that, and we talked about educating teachers along the spectrum of grades and all that work. And I guess I know that we had that conversation very close to this presentation. So, but I want to make sure that whatever we are doing is more than a Band-Aid to the situation, if possible. So I'm wondering, how does this speak to that?
Okay, so first of all, you're never going to see an actual direct line item that will match a goal. It's all encompassing. It covers multiple line items. So we'll start with, for instance, our goal to improve children's reading as well as mathematics. I'm going to put the two of those together. And it's for all of our children, even though we have spelled out specific cohorts that we want to address, because that's where we see the biggest academic gaps, but it is about all of our children. So right away in the strong budget, you will see that not only did we maintain our reading and math special interventionists, but there is a request for additional interventionists. So again, starting to address some of those needs. And so there are different tiers in which we can meet the needs of our students. And the first for us is tier 1, and that is the classroom teacher. So for the classroom teacher, we want to bolster our professional development. So in the professional development line, you will see just it's monetary. It doesn't list what we're going to be doing, but our focus is to begin to make sure that our elementary teachers have an opportunity to be Orton Gillingham trained to address our students who may be diagnosed as dyslexic. It also, in terms of continuous professional development on the science of reading, that is a big shift, and still people are trying to grasp an understanding. We are going back to the simple basics of phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, fluency, comprehension, vocabulary building. And so those are the things that we will focus on for the classroom teachers so that they can address some of the concerns immediately in the classroom. They're the first tier. They're the first level of defense. Then when we start to look at tier 2, we look at our interventionists. Those are our support staff. So those are the math and the reading interventionists. There's also the coaches that we have. We only have one coach for literacy and one for math. The coaches are the ones who actually work with classroom teachers to bolster their instructional practices, to help them to differentiate in the classroom. And so all of this has to come under the umbrella of professional development. The other piece, too, is curriculum. So curriculum, as you all know, we have implemented 2 new programs, and right now I'm focusing on elementary, and I'll go to the middle and high. So right now we are focusing on implementing 2 curricular programs. One is called EL, which is for literacy, which is a very robust, high quality instruction for our students. And we are only in the 3rd year of implementation of that. And our teachers haven't even implemented the full body of that curriculum, because as we go through the years, we do the training. Our coaches are working with our staff. We're providing professional development so that they can understand and break down the modules and to do those lessons. The teachers have time to work together in terms of their grade level meetings and their department meetings to help to create lessons that are not only rigorous for our students, but also ones that they can learn how to use the different strategies that are within that curriculum. The same applies for our math programs. So that's the 2nd tier. The 3rd tier is when we take our support staff, and of course, I need to point out, 2nd tier, I'm going to go back, our special ed teachers. All of our special ed teachers should have some knowledge and strategies to be able to support our students in the areas in which they have need. So whether it be reading, writing, mathematics, that is also another layer. And so it could be a pull-out or it could be a push-in where they're working with the classroom teacher. The 3rd tier is then those true supports where the special ed teacher will pull the child out and work with them in small groups or one-on-one. And then additionally, you have your math and your reading interventionists who will also do some more one-on-ones. For our ELs, we have tutors that we also employ in terms of assisting our students. At the middle school level, similar model. We are working on currently right now, and there are a couple of work groups based upon our strategic plan who have been launched and are talking about how are we going to address the middle grades and the high school grades. And so with the middle school, we know that in the past, it used to be addressed in the English classroom, and so for us, content area, we're going to be training our teachers in terms of really kind of using the strategies that they already have in their toolbox in terms of SEI strategies and teaching vocabulary, which is a part of the reading, and then learning how to also, in terms of comprehension, how to summarize, how to do main ideas, and then employ better writing. But we have to, again, work with our first tier, and that's professional development, working with our teachers, looking at our current curriculum, not necessarily changing the curriculum because it is teacher built, but how can we then include those practices where students are building those vocabulary and so on. Those students who definitely need more explicit direction in terms of building those foundational skills of reading that they may have missed in the elementary level grades, then we rely on our special education teacher, as we will also have reading and math interventionists. So we are working on that layer right now. That plan is being drafted as literally as we speak. The goal is for that to be ready and for us to be full throttle in implementation come the next school year. The same goes for the high school, a little bit more challenging. Me being a former high school teacher, I know that I teach science. I am not a reading teacher. However, when I was in the classroom, and this is a similar kind of implementation process, is that I taught a lot of vocabulary. As a science teacher, it is a full language of vocabulary, but within the teaching of the vocabulary, you start to help the students to make connections of, is this a vocabulary solely for this content area, or can it cross all content areas? And then how to break that vocabulary down so that you can begin comprehension and understanding and being able to apply the use of that vocabulary. So that is a skill that our teachers actually already have, but they need to use it more for our readers, for that language acquisition. All of our teachers pretty much have an SEI endorsement. An SEI is not just for sheltered English students, although it's just good plain practice. And so we're going to be working with our teachers of how to unpack that and to really address some of those issues. So you won't see line for line items, but you'll see that it's encompassed within the different categories. The same with in terms of addressing mental health, socio-emotional learning. That is another part of our district improvement plan goal, is really that we are maintaining our adjustment counselors, our school counselors, our social workers, our school psychologists. Matter of fact, there was a request to have an additional school psychologist at the high school. We only currently have one now, and we have just under 900 students for one school psychologist. So you talk about equitable distribution of our staffing. We're working on that. So I know I could be long-winded. I'm going to summarize that up, but I just wanted to give you some examples of how the budget is really starting to target our goals. And it goes across pretty much most of the line areas. It's there.
I have a semi-ignorant question as a non-educator. How much guidance or control do we have over PD, over professional development?
So, in terms of the school committee?
Well, right, we're talking about doing this literacy and working it through the years, and do we have the ability to say, this is what we'd like you to work on?
Okay, and so you actually have already done that, in a sense. One was the reading focus. And so we currently have a professional development working group. And actually, there should have been a committee even prior to my tenure that was always reviewing professional development. And so that committee is actually composed of staff members, and it's led through our Director of Curriculum Instruction. And so she reignited that committee. And so currently, right now, they are working on, I believe it's 3 surveys that they're sending out to teachers, to staff, to see, first of all, what their needs are. But we also know what we currently are working on. So for instance, we know that we need to continue with our restorative practice. We want to revisit the responsive classroom. We want to work on the literacy skills across grades, K through 12. So, having professional development that's geared to that. So the science of reading, Orton Gillingham, which we're actually sending people out for training. We're using not only operating funds to be able to do some of these things, but we're also using grant funds. I'm not going to take credit for this, but the elementary principals, along with the Director of Curriculum Instruction, just submitted a request for their endowment grant for the responsive classroom. And I know that when I first came into district, that was a request from some of our teachers saying, we haven't done this in like 15 years. We know that there's fresh new things that we would like, and there's new staff. So we are bringing that back as well. So that was not an ignorant question. That was good. And so to bring it back to school committee, so that group right now is drafting the 3-year professional development plan. And so you will have the opportunity to take a look at that once it's ready. And the goal for that is also in June. I know I'm pushing them, but we hope that we'll have something. We'll at least have the rollout for next year and what we're doing. And I say this because I know that the focus and the concern has been in reading. So a lot of our professional development will be heavily dictated towards addressing that concern, as well as differentiation, so that our classroom teachers are the first level of defense. They're the ones who have the children, and so the others are supports. Those are additions. So we've got to work with our classroom teachers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Member Agnew.
Oh, I have a lot of things I've been thinking about. I won't take up too much time, but one is in the PD area that, again, I don't mean to refer to when I was in another role as principal, but there was a district improvement plan, and then there are school improvement plans, and those inform evaluations for teachers, so that even though there may not be always offerings necessarily through the district, depending on how the PD committee comes up with its needs or plans, there is also the obligation that teachers have to meet the goals of the school improvement plan, which is part of the district improvement plan. So the evaluation process is really a great one, I think, for leadership to have an opportunity to encourage refining your skills in those areas. So I think that that's another way that we would think about it. The other thing is, I think, at least last meeting we had, I think there was a conflation between Tier 2 and Tier 3, or Tier 1 and Tier 2, in that there are students who don't know how to read, but it's not because they're disabled.
Yes.
And I think we have to really be careful with that, because, again, harking back to my time as a principal, when we had the I don't know what they're called now, the first, when you come together as a SST or a support.
Support. They have different names.
They have different names, but when you look at the students who are not doing well, you think about all the things that can happen in Tier 1 and Tier 2 with the reading interventionist or the math interventionist, rather than quickly go saying, oh, they're disabled because they're 7th graders and they can't read. We know there are a lot of kids who've been through situations in our schools, including the pandemic. It doesn't mean they're disabled. It just means they didn't have the instruction. So I hope that that's something that the public understands, that this is not so easy, and that if we're going to have Orton Gillingham training, that's not going to be for Tier 1. That's a very specialized approach. when students do have a diagnosed disability in reading, for sure. And then a couple of specifics. One, I was surprised to hear in public comment, I know we're not supposed to respond to it, but that there are 2 interventionists at Bridge and 4 at Jackson Street. I didn't see that in the budget, and so I just want to make sure, because I can imagine the public are thinking, whoa, how did that happen, kind of thing. So I don't have my book with me, and if that's something we could just clear up, because it goes to the other issue that came up the last time, that in the budget book, which each school did their profile, the needs of Jackson Street were listed. There were requests that were greater than a school that has higher needs, and I think that we need to be really careful with that.
It says 2 for both.
It says 2,
Yes,
okay.
interventions 2 and intervention.
I just thought,
Yeah.
if that's, so we have 2, okay, great. I just want to make sure, because that's one of those things that gets the life phone out there. This is your phone. I think that, having gone through this myself for 24 years, when you put out your wish list, each school says this is what we need. We do have to rely on the school committee and the superintendent to understand and make decisions of priorities. So that if there is a request that seems greater for a certain school than we deem the needs are for, that's something that needs to be addressed by the administration, by the superintendent. We can even join in on that too and say, okay, well, as I said last time, I talked about the needs of each school, and Bridge Street being the highest need, Jackson in the elementary is the lowest. So I think that that's something that informs us in the terms of our priorities for those schools. And even if a principal says, oh, this is what we really need, it's all part of a package. I don't know if I'm making myself very clear on that one, but we can all say we all need this and this and this, but we know there's a limited amount of money, and we have to make some decisions that may be hard for people, but they have to be based on data. And let's see, was that I think there were other things I said, but it'll come up along the way. So thank you. Thanks.
Member Hennessy.
I have a lot of my questions were answered. I have one quick question and then a comment. My quick question, I hope it's quick, is I see on Bridge and Jackson specials and tech teachers, but not on Ryan Road or Leeds. And I'm just wondering, I'm curious.
Is that in the profile?
It's in their
profile.
their staff profile, yeah. So that was just a question I had, if that meant anything or if it was significant.
No, so let me just take a look, because I know we were trying to make sure that everyone was reporting the same, and that some schools may have grouped. We have service providers on. Okay, so, and the 2 of them have it listed, and so then Leeds does not have it listed?
Leeds does not have, nor does Ryan Road, specials technology teacher. And
but they have them. So here's, this is probably what they did. So let me just clarify. There are 2 integration specialist technology teachers that cover the 4 elementaries.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's how
The
that's
split.
done.
Okay.
And so in the strong budget, our director of technology has requested 2 additional integration. So that each school has their own.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
And then my comment is really, when you said for the strong budget that it was your administrative leadership team expressing the needs in the building, that to me, I almost don't want to have a discussion like, well, there we are. That's where we need to be. And then when I look at the outcomes, it's interesting to me, again, this is just a comment, that in the outcomes for the strong budget, students are mentioned 5 times, whereas in the level service and the city's fiscal target, students are only named once. And it just spoke, all I'm saying is that I love your strong budget, and I think it's really speaking to the students' needs, and we need to really keep that at the center of what we're talking about. So I appreciate that. That's it.
Okay. I got you. Since you said that there was something that came up at Budget and Property on Monday, and just to notice that when I was doing this, putting this together, the font size, and then adding some things, but even with the city fiscal target, we still are working towards our district improvement goals, and I did not put that in the outcome. So this was really pointing out the significant pluses to having those budget, the different versions of the budget, so.
Member Miller.
So first thing, I was just wanting to follow up on something that Member LaBounty said, which was when you were asking about whether some budget line addressed some of the things we talked about last time. I was thinking about when we were talking about professional development, that we were talking about question of training staff to learn skills to deal with the most behaviorally challenged students that have posed dangerous situations in our schools because of their own difficulties. And I wondered if there was any, I may have missed something, but is there any kind of training about that?
Yes, so when I was addressing Member LaBounty, I was really speaking in generalities in terms of staff, all staff. But in terms of special areas, right now, currently, there is about a cohort of 8 or 9 paraeducators who have signed up to become RBT trained. So I have to think about what RBT means right now. Registered behavioral technician. Come to me. So those are paraeducators who have been trained to deal particularly with students who may be on the spectrum or who may have behavioral plans and helps to be able to manage students' behaviors better. So that is in process as well. We do have BCBAs. We're trying to maintain them, which we would like for them to be our own employees as opposed to contracting out, and we are working on that as well. The BCBAs are the ones who really help to create those behavioral plans. And some more restorative type practices in terms of how we interact with our students.
Thank you. I have other comments, but as I mentioned to the superintendent earlier, I had gone through the budget line by line, and while on one hand, I just want to say that the strong budget is what really appealed to me, but I had some questions about whether there were any possible cuts that could be made to the strong budget to make it more financially reasonable or possible. But I don't know. These were questions that I have no idea what the answer is. So, I think you just explained this, but I wasn't sure why it says DW Tech Services, and those were doubled from what they had been.
Right. And I just explained that. So currently, right now, we have 2 tech integration specialists that cover our 4 elementary schools. So the request was to have 1 per each building. That's why that has doubled, that request.
Okay, all right. And then I also had asked you previously, but not before the meeting. So there was a cut from a title called therapist, and it said was cut from 146,775 to 135,852, and that was only at Bridge Street and Leeds. So I wondered about that too.
Okay, so Bobby, you can check what I'm about to say. So if I remember our director sharing that information, currently it was contracted out and we were bringing it back in-house, so there was a savings. But Bobby, can you confirm that?
Well, I can't confirm that it was contracted, but what I can say is that there's often a change in personnel, so we might have hired at a lower step.
That's a possibility.
And the other piece of that could be that we have grant funding that shifted to pay more of that particular therapist at the time. I mean, I would have to go back to my records to see, but those are some of the extenuating circumstances that could make that change, not necessarily reduction.
That's good. The last one, and I'll let other people talk, is I just noticed certain line items that seem to like go up a tremendous amount. For example, tuition reimbursement went from 0 to 25,000. I mean, there was some major increases.
So Bobby, do you want to share in terms of how you cleaned up the level services budget to what was budgeted and then the actuals?
Yes. So for that particular line, especially, the tuition reimbursement, it's a contractual benefit that has not been budgeted for in the past couple of years.
Crazy.
Somehow it got omitted from the budget, so I needed to, in reviewing everything, I needed to put it back in. In addition to that, there's some also big increases in our utilities, and that is due to finally having a really good review from our DPW and then our CAPA department as far as what our utility usages will be. So I did have to increase that. And so the level service budget includes those because they're actually services that we're using at this time that need to be increased because the costs are actual.
Also, Member Miller had a question earlier this evening that there was a request, and I believe it was Jackson Street, where there was the instructional pay for teachers increased. Was that the line?
Yeah, it was a very large increase.
I think it was, that was the one that increased to 15,000. That was to cover stipends for teachers who were either doing duties or other things outside of their regular scheduled day.
Yeah, that is a line that was increased, which I would have leaned toward maybe putting it into the strong budget, but the argument was that it was happening currently in that school. So it's pay for teachers that are doing things outside of their normal day. Per contract, they get paid at $35 per hour. And historically, that has been a bit, or quite a bit, larger than what we budget for. So I included that in the level service budget.
Thank you.
Member Stein.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't hear you, and I'm.
It makes a sound when you're.
Yeah, he's coming.
I'm sorry, is there someone talking? We can't hear anything on Zoom.
There's not.
Thank
We're
you.
trying to get a microphone to work.
Emily, I hope you can hear me now.
All good.
Okay.
Yes.
I have some general comments about the budget and 3 areas of questions I want to put on the table. My general observations, especially after our March Madness of budget and property subcommittee meetings, are that the city's fiscal target would be pretty catastrophic for us, losing 25.8 staff at least. I don't understand in any way, shape, or form we could maintain that we are meeting our district improvement plan goals or even pursuing them. Similarly, at level services, and I appreciate Dr. Bonner on Monday acknowledging that we are at the bone. I think staying at the bone is also equally untenable, as we've been hearing all year from our staff and our caregivers. So the only thing to really consider in my mind is the strong budget, because it allows us to at least restore some of what was lost and actually have a chance at making progress towards the district improvement goals. So my questions are in a couple different areas, and I'll lay them all out. One is just a technical question. We found out on Monday that the paraeducator tabulation in order to meet IEP grids was missing 5.8. So I wonder if we have to reduce the level, for level services, are we actually reducing 5.8 positions because it wasn't considered beforehand? And similarly for the strong budget, what impact does it have? The related question to that is, my understanding was that was what we know in June, but I kind of hear that as saying we know we're missing 5.8 that we're supposed to have currently to meet IEPs, potentially. So if what we know in June, it's a few months away, are we saying that actually right now this year we are missing 5.8 paraeducators? Or do we know that all the IEPs that are slated to begin in September or at some point in June will require those? So there's that question. The other thing that I continue to be very concerned about is the way that Bridge Street Schools has been represented in this budget. I've raised this numerous times. I'm waiting still for a public records request I hope to have later this week. But the evidence that we have seen suggests that the requests from the staff were not necessarily adequately finding their way into the requests brought to us. On Monday, we heard, particular for slide 160, where there's just a blank spot for Bridge Street School. There was just some oversight, and actually there is going to be an additional English language learner teacher. But I don't have a lot of confidence, based on everything we've seen, that the needs of that school are reflected in this budget and have been reflected in this process. The other questions I have really revolve around this question of reading and what we're doing for students in secondary space around reading. I agree that not every student with a reading deficiency has a specific learning disability with reading, but I disagree that we know that for sure, and I disagree that we know that for sure based on the data that we have. And that's not what Member Agnes said, but I'm trying to really put a fine point on it, that when we have a cohort like in 8th grade where over 50% are 3 or more grades behind, and the IEP rate for that grade is only 34%, it's possible that we might have missed some kids. And if that's the rates, maybe our tiered support services aren't adequate in order to improve reading. So I still have not heard a plan for how we're going to serve these students and help them. I'm afraid that when they get to 9th grade and we no longer do any screening, we're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. And I'm very concerned. And I sent a number of questions that I want to read into the record regarding this. And I'm hoping we can get some answers on them. First question, are all students on IEPs with reading, writing specific learning disabilities receiving services from special education teachers or providers with the requisite training, or in Gillingham or similar, Wilson, etc.? Do these students, these are students at the secondary level, receive a similar amount of services to their elementary peers, either one-to-one pullout or small group 4 to 5 days a week? Second question, the iReady data for students 1, 2, or 3 grade levels behind or more represents a larger percentage than the amount of students on IEPs. Are we complying with child find laws to identify students with disabilities? And is this data a clue that we may be missing some students? Because the data is only minimally disaggregated, it's difficult to tell, and it's unclear if 504 students are folded into the IEP results or are not. Third question, what is our plan to address the reading challenges for our non-IEP students? What resources are in place and how will they improve student literacy? For example, the 8th grade has 52% of its class 3 or more grades below reading level, and only 34% is on an IEP. Furthermore, have the interventions for the 34% currently being offered services demonstrated improvement? Are our interventions making progress? 4, how are we screening for literacy proficiency in grades 9 through 12? And 5, from your perspective, and this was addressed to Director of Student Services and the Director of Curriculum, what is the plan to improve reading for both students on IEPs and not who are significantly behind in literacy? How is this reflected in each of the 3 budgets before us? That's really one of the core things I would like to see. I know we hear a lot of generalized things about Tier 1 and Tier 2 and this or that. How do either or all of these budgets reflect the plan that's going to be effective? Thank you.
All right, so those questions I am not going to address this evening. Those questions were sent on top of 10 other questions. So in the course of the time that I will work with our staff to respond to those questions within the 10 days, since I'm just hearing those now. Now, to reflect on some comments that you made, the 4% number, in terms of the 4% city fiscal target, on Monday's meeting, there was a request to actually say what, in detail, what staff will you be reducing? We don't know that number. We don't know that. So there is a general number that was thrown out that it could be 20 plus staff. And it depends on what staff that may be. It may be teachers, it may be paras. The reason why it's staff that we're looking at is because staff makes up between 83 to 85% of our operating budget. The other piece is that it also is contingent on our finalization of our collective bargaining unit contract, which we are in the process of negotiating. The other thing is to reduce all non-personnel lines, which we will consider, which we did last year and we will do this year, but there's a fine line to that in terms of how much we can reduce those lines. And then also, we do have about 9 retirements that are occurring. So depending on how we hire, we'll determine whether we have a cost savings in those different lines. The other thing is too that, as I put it out, we are in the midst of negotiations. So it's all contingent on what the new wages, step increases, and any other monetary requests that are coming from the union that will determine what we will need to do in order to meet those obligations. So I want clarification. I just wanted to clarify that as people are hearing numbers being thrown out there, that there is no defined number in terms of what the requirement may be for reductions. The next piece is that the question was about the 5.8 paraeducators. And yes, after the presentation of this budget, our Director of Student Services looked at the projections for next year in terms of the needs of our paraeducators. And that paraeducators being both general ed paraeducators as well as our special ed educators. And you will see that in the strong budget, there was a request for several new paraeducators. So when Bobby worked with the Director of Student Services, Matt Holloway, the analysis came out to be about 5.8 paraeducators that we do need to add to the budget. And Bobby, while I'm talking, you might want to figure out what that cost will be. And that is not considered in, of course, the fiscal target budget. You could let me know if it's in the level services, Bobby, and it's not represented in the level services budget, nor is it represented in the strong budget, just to confirm, am I right there? And then also the comment about Bridge Street staff. So, you know, we have an administrator in that building. And so we hope that the staff would talk to the administrator and have conversations, open dialogue. And so I rely on the administrators to bring that information to me. And so I trust the working relationships with my administrators to bring that information to me. And so as expressed on Monday evening, it was not an oversight, but I wanted to recognize that the EL position, there was a request to increase the current 0.8 EL full-time position at Bridge Street to a 1.0 full-time, making the number of EL staff at that school to be a full 2.0 position. That 0.2 position was actually included in the new request for the multilingual learner position. That person will be covering the additional hours that will be needed for that building. So I want to make sure that we have clarity on that information. And I think, Bobby, if you could just speak to the paraeducators for me, please.
Yeah, so to do the 5.8, that would be $220,684. That was an increase of that. That is in the strong budget. If we needed to add that, we would probably be somewhere around 500,000 to the level service budget, because many of the paraeducators that are needed were in the request for the strong budget. So if we went with the strong budget, we would have an increase of the 226.84. If we went with the level service, we'd be somewhere up around 500,000, because we need about 14 paras on top of the level service.
You have a follow-up?
I don't want to touch, sorry.
That's not going to work.
Maybe?
So sorry.
I touched it, I shouldn't have touched it.
Check. Mike, try that.
That's okay. I'll try that, I'm not going to touch it. I wanted to point out that, to my knowledge, no one on the subcommittee requested actual positions. What we requested was the number of positions. And we were presented a slide in response by the superintendent that said 20-plus positions, combined unit A and C, in reductions would be required for the city services budget. But on top of that, the additional information about the 5.8 paraeducators was added. So the figure that we got in that meeting, too, was 25.8 at least reduced on the city's target budget, okay? No one asked for actual positions to be selected, so that's not a request that was made. We wanted to know the actual positions in terms of the number. Similarly, we asked about the COLAs, and we got a description of the various COLAs and the impacts those might have, because it lists on the summary slide, you know, COLAs and steps. The other thing is the questions I read tonight are not records requests. So there's 10 days, I'm not sure what the 10 days is. The records request is around the communication with Bridge Street, and the oversight I was referring to was the blank slide for Bridge Street on slide 160, which didn't have the account of the rationale for the English language learning request in the budget, which every other elementary school had. We still don't have the account of what the English language learner needs are and how the staffing is going to meet those needs. And furthermore, I appreciate that you trust your administrator, but we have to trust you. And when we've all been sent information that doesn't square with what has been presented to us, we rely on you to find out what is actually happening and bringing those things into the budget. And I'm concerned we haven't had that here.
So as I read the email from you, for the city's fiscal target 4% budget, please detail the amount of FTE cuts and the impact to COLA steps mentioned in slides. So in order to detail, I would have to actually determine what positions those are and calculate them up to give you an actual number. So I'm sorry I misinterpreted what you said in your email. I just want to clarify that in terms of what that request was and how I interpreted your request.
Okay, Member Weisenfeld.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start by saying that I was also a little bit confused because I was at the Budget and Properties Committee meeting on Monday, and it seemed it was very clear, and we can all listen to the recording, that there would be in excess of 20 additional cuts necessary if we were to go with that budget. And the 5.8, the 5+ para-educator positions, I thought that discussion was about making sure that we meet the needs of special needs students, as Matt Holloway described, so that would be essential. So that did bring the, I remember, Dr. Bonner, you said you don't like to talk about specifics because you don't want to scare people, but then we did talk about, that it would be 25+ positions that would have to be cut from that budget. So I'm a little confused now that we're not all in agreement on that. Excuse me?
I just want clarification because I never said 25+. I said that there's potentially, it could be 20+ positions.
Okay.
And it's not an accurate count unless we actually look at the positions that we are going to actually reduce. And I would not make that decision randomly. I would have that conversation with the administrators.
Right.
So I just want clarification that I didn't say 25.
Okay.
I know the number that was said.
And again,
It was
I don't
on the slide.
I don't have the I don't have the recording in my brain, and we're all subject to remembering things not quite correctly, but certainly there's a large number of positions that would have to be cut on top of our already very to the bone situation in the schools. So again, I thought we had a really productive conversation on Monday, Dr. Bonner, with everybody there, and I really particularly like how you laid out compared the three different budgets. I thought that was really, really helpful, and I was particularly interested. We started talking about the whole outcome section. We spoke a little bit about how both the level services budget and the strong budget are described as meeting the needs of the district improvement plan, but you detailed in some ways how the strong budget would do that better and more quickly than the level services. Tonight, I'd like to ask you about two other bullets in the strong budget under outcomes. You talk about how this budget addresses safety and student management, while that is not something that's listed under any of the other budgets. So I'm wondering if you could explain that, as well as there's another bullet in the strong budget that talks about how this budget would reduce class sizes, and I'm wondering if you could quantify that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Weisenfreud. I want to practice your name. I'm going to get that
I feel
correct.
bad every time.
All right. So to speak to the first point of addresses safety and student management, so you will notice that in the strong budget, there were several requests for additional general paraeducators to become hall monitors and cover the CAF and recess duties. And so that would, and also there was a request for a tiered support paraeducator. So all of these particular positions would be to assist outside of the classroom in terms of monitoring, managing, making sure students are safe in areas that do not involve instruction. So that's where that bulleted point comes from. And then the class size. So I cannot necessarily give you quantity numbers, but actually, if you look at the high school profile, I believe that there is a breakdown. The high school is requesting some additional content area staff that will help to offload some of the classes that have been impacted, being 27, 28, depending on the content area. Could be 30 in some, depending on the class. And so particularly, I can give the example of hiring an additional English teacher, which was a position that we did lose last year. That by restoring that position, it would not only reduce the current class sizes, but it will also open the door for more students to be able to take that particular class and not have to take the dual enrollment at Gateway. And we also had we currently now have a social studies teacher who is teaching, I think it's two sections of English. So, so when I give the example of definitely addressing class size at the high school, that's one example. The middle school wants to, there's two teachers who are currently teaching both 7th and 8th grade out of their, I don't want to say house, but out of their particular cohort of teachers. So the administration would like to address that and then to also reduce class sizes. So at the middle school, class sizes are about 27 and 28.
Just a brief follow-up, Dr. Bonner. What do you think are the ideal class sizes at each level?
Absolutely. And so this is just my philosophical belief. For elementary grades, I'll start with kindergarten. For kindergarten classrooms, as long as there's a para, anything under 20, preferred 18. For grades 1 through 5, under 25 students. 25 and under, I should say. And actually I would actually recommend that for middle and high school grades. For science, I recommend a different number, especially if you were doing lab science. So a lower number.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Member Seraphy Cox.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for the echoiness of my audio. I am moving into a new office, and so there's nothing on the wall, so it's just all echo. One of my questions, which was about the electricity increases. The other question about the utilities was the increases in water and sewer. I think the lowest increase was 32%, and then there were increases in water and sewer that were like it needs a 76% increase in water and sewer. We're talking about $5,500 to $9,700. So we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars, but I'm just curious, that there were increases in water sewer rates. Was it a year or two ago? Is this just now being reflected on our bills, or are there actual other reasons for these increases?
Okay,
that's one question, and then I have another question about transportation.
So there wasn't an increase to the rate. I'll just clarify. There was a base rate added for sewer and an increase into the base rate for water, but not the usage rate.
Right. Just that costs went up is what I meant.
Yes. Bobby, do you want to take this? Because I know that our CAPA director, as well as Tony Kuznier's, our CAPA director, as well as DPW, sent some numbers to us.
Yeah. And so this is the first time that I had some really good numbers.
It's nice.
That came directly from DPW and from CAPA. I had really, they delved into it really greatly this year and came up with some reasonable numbers. We had been overspent in many of those lines and underspent in some, but I got a really good information from them. So this was the time that I needed to put them to where we are in actuality, based on the feedback from the DPW and CAPA department.
Okay. Okay, so it's just a reflection of what we're actually using.
Yeah.
And then for both homeless transportation and foster care transportation, I see that other funding is not indicated as an income source or a funding source for those two lines, but I do know that we get reimbursement for them. So I'm just wondering how that factors in, how those reimbursements factor into the budget. I know that we get the reimbursement the next year, so that makes it hard, but yeah, just wondering how you do that accounting.
Yep, so for the past 2 years, we've overspent those lines by quite a bit, and our reimbursement has been pretty small, but like you said, it does follow a year behind. And it's not always, it's not a full reimbursement, obviously. So I did have to bring those up. Last year, I believe it was somewhere around, I want to say 35,000 that we got for a reimbursement. So I didn't bring those lines up fully to what we had overspent this year, but I did bring them up substantially.
Okay, I see. So when you get the reimbursement, it's almost like you bill it or you put it into the accounting as like a refund. Okay, that makes sense. So it decreases what we're spending rather than being a funding source for it. All right, I understand that. Okay, so I think those were my questions. I will say that for those school committee members who have not watched the budget subcommittee meetings, they are very, very informative, and I recommend watching them on 1.25 speed, because you know, when people are thinking live, they tend to speak slowly. So you can watch a 2-hour meeting in like an hour and, what is that, an hour and 15 minutes? Yeah, but it's just very, very helpful for decreasing the number of questions that I'm asking here that were already, you know, addressed there. Yeah, I'll just kind of state that the strong budget feels like a budget that will actually help us, you know, meet the goals that we have set out for the district. And I am, you know, just really cognizant of the challenges that we've been hearing in terms of, you know, both from administrators as well as our staff and caregivers and even students about you know, the effect of cuts from last year, which of course is part of the reason why the mid-year appropriation happened. You know, if we're going to be in the practice of trusting the people who are in leadership of our schools, then I think, you know, it looks to me like the strong budget is the budget that our administrators would like for us to have. I recognize that that baseline number is not obviously the same as the 4% goal from the city. I'm trying to think so in terms of process, this is just noticed as a discussion. So the only time that not the only time, but like the next meeting that we are having on the budget is the April 10th meeting. Is that correct?
There's
There's a placeholder meeting if needed in between.
A placeholder meeting.
Because
Okay.
of how the calendar falls.
I'm sorry?
Just because of how the calendar falls, we wouldn't necessarily be able to have another meeting after the 10th and meet the deadline.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I guess I would be curious to know, from the representative that happens to be in our meeting today, who is from the city, Mayor, if you have any kind of initial responses to or initial thoughts on what you're seeing in terms of these three budgets being presented to us, and what you, next year. I mean, you've talked about the fiscal outlook, that sort of thing, but as we're thinking about whatever our next meeting date is, as we're thinking about the potential of passing a budget, I would be curious to know, where your thoughts are.
Thank you for asking. I do have things to share. I was gonna, since I think Member Davis and Member Gazy haven't spoken yet, I was gonna wait till they speak, but I'm happy to speak now if people would prefer. I don't. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I do have to share some sort of economic reality. It's a hard aspect of my job, as was indicated, but I think it's one of the main reasons why this position sits on this body. So, and, I hope that folks are following all the conversations that are happening in districts all around us, all across the Commonwealth, but certainly all around us. I've been in 2 financial meetings, I'll say, in the last 2 days, one with Mass mayors and municipal experts, and then one today with finance and bond experts. And they were both very clear that there are definite indicators of a slowing economy. So not just like the chaos and the uncertainty that's coming out of Washington, but like actual signs that we're entering into a recessionary economic cycle. So, and something that we've sort of talked about a little bit in these discussions, but haven't talked about more concretely, and because it's an unknown maybe, is the reduction or elimination of federal grants and the possibility of that, and the impact they could have in schools. We've actually already seen this week public health grants being terminated that go directly to municipalities. So that the reduction of federal grants to the state also would, as well as the state expecting lower revenues, may have an impact on state aid. So, again, as I've said, in the city, we are pushing our projected revenues to much higher levels this year to build in the $2 million that were added. That was the additional increase for the schools from this year. So we're doing that while also reducing some of our other needs and obligations to get to that $2 million. And doing this while there's a threat of an economic downturn. So obviously an economic downturn would hit those revenues that we've now really pushed very high. So that's something to be mindful of and certainly concerned about. We're still looking at departmental budgets and sort of analyzing them and meeting with departments, but at this point, we're projecting at least a shortfall of revenue of $846,227 and that's before any negotiations. So one thing that we are doing is we are rolling in the additional $200,000 to the schools. So that's from the $50,000 that was voted, are we still in March? Just this month. It's been a very long month. That was $50,000 for 10 weeks or however many weeks. And so estimating that that would actually be more like $200,000 for next year. So that's an additional $200,000 that we are building in. So with new tax revenue, so as you know, we can only raise property taxes by 2.5%. So with new tax revenue and increases in revenue projections, which again, we've pushed very high, in a potential recession, total additional revenue for the entire FY26 budget is estimated to be about $4,071,941. About $4 million, let's say. So the other thing that we have an actual number for right now, which is a fixed cost that we can do nothing about, is health insurance, and that's going to go up 10.5%, so 10.5%. So that fixed cost is $1.4 million that we have to build in to the budget. So, you know, these are the realities, and I have to share them with you all, and you have to take that into account in decision making. So, you know, the proposed level services budget is an increase of about 2.8 million over FY25. And so if you take that 2.8 and you add 1.4 million, which is the health insurance, which again, fixed costs we can do nothing about, and ridiculous at 10.5%, but actually districts, we're lucky that we're in the GIC and that it's 10.5%. There are other places that are looking at a much higher percent. So if you add those two together, that's 4.3 billion, right? The strong budget is an increase of 5.1 million over the current FY25 budget. So that's 2.3 million more than we will even get in new tax revenue. It would require a $6 million override this spring, so like before FY26 starts. And if it were to last 4 years, it would require another $4.25 million override in FY30. So with, again, the new tax revenue and the increases in projections for 26 at about 4 million, that alone doesn't even cover that budget and doesn't leave anything for health insurance. And also doesn't leave, and we're not talking about any increases or anything for any other department in the city. So that is the hard economic reality. And I'll tell you, it sucks that it's my job to share it with you, but that is what it is. And we have, you know, we've heard you all. So in the past 3 years, the schools have been increased by 24%. And we have pushed revenues, like we have, and you know, maybe people will disagree with that, but we absolutely have pushed revenues incredibly far. And it's, with what we're seeing in the economy right now, it's pretty unclear if we'll meet them. So that is, so again, I appreciate you asking, Member Seraphy Cox, and I'm sorry to be the messenger, but those are sort of the hard numbers that we have right now. Since I just spoke, can I just jump on and ask a question that I have real quick? Is that okay?
Okay. If it's on a different topic, can I finish?
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Sorry?
Sure. I thought you were done. So go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you. I appreciated the kind of the depth of the economic analysis and that sort of thing. And obviously these are budgets, so it's an economic analysis that needs to happen. I also wonder, you know, as you're looking then at the budgets, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that if, I don't know, if you were the only school committee member voting, which obviously is not going to happen, but like that you would rather see the school committee pass the 4% budget, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes, I mean, it's what we've built in and committed to. And, you know, I know it doesn't feel like a lot, but, and I feel like I've been repeating myself for 3 years, but a sort of guaranteed 4% is very unusual for a district to have. And when you can only raise 70% of your revenue by 2.5%, it is it's not easy to get to it. And,
I understand all that. I was just wanting clarification because I hadn't heard that specificity in what you were saying. So I have a question then about the override pieces. You were saying that if the strong budget were to move forward and be what the city adopted, that we would need to have an override this fall.
You need it, no. Strong? No, it would need to be the spring. It would have to be before July 1st.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I misspoke about that.
That was just me not remembering correctly. Thank you. Well, regardless, my question actually doesn't have to do with the particular timing of the election. It's more of, I'm curious if it is, I've seen in other municipalities around the area that they have overrides that are for, specific projects. There is, I think, just an override put forward, for a public safety complex in a neighboring community. So I'm curious if, I would assume then that it would be possible to have an override that is specific for the school department. Is that correct? Is that legal?
So I think the distinction you're making is between a debt exclusion override for, let's say, a building and something where you will pay it off over time versus a general fund operating override, so an operating budget override.
I see. Okay, so if it's a debt exclusion, then you can have it be earmarked for a specific project. But if it's for an operating budget, it's not possible to have it earmarked for a specific department?
You could write into the ballot language probably specificity about a general fund operating budget, general fund operating override.
Okay, to have it be specific. That's a question that I've received from constituents is, well, can't we have it, can we have an override that's specifically for schools? So that was a question I didn't know the answer to.
Okay.
I think now those are my questions. So thank you for allowing that part. And so go ahead, Mayor, if you had.
Okay, I have just sort of a small question, which is, we heard, I can't remember where in the budget cycle, but we heard about the marching band had a relatively small request for an increase, and I tried to find it in the budget. I did like a word search. I was just, is there an increase to the?
No, that wasn't a request from the high school principal. So that was interesting because that was a statement that was made by our student reps.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think. I know that there was a request for something for the athletic program, but I do not remember.
I remember it was like $1,000 or something. It was a relatively modest request.
It looks like Bobby might be raising her hand.
Oh, good. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did. I did specifically ask that question when we had a meeting with the principal and assistant principals, and they had not even been made aware of that request, is what I was told. And they were going to check into it, and they had never indicated that that was part of their request. So that was not included.
Okay, thank you.
We did ask that question.
Okay. Okay, Member Davis, you have not spoken yet, yes?
Is this close enough? One of my questions is sort of a comment. I'm not sure how to bring it up. So, but I'm looking within the budget book. We have the strategic plan. But of course, it doesn't have a cost, and it actually comes up with. We've mentioned quite a number of times about reading, and with a focus on the children and the reading. So it's just kind of left me, what I keep writing in my notes is like how to talk about it in the budget discussion, because it's not very specific to the cost. But I guess I just wanted to put it out there that clearly it's a concern of all of ours and community members. And with this idea of the statement about we can't intervene our way out of this, but see, my microphone's doing stuff too, is, but interventionists cost money. So it's, I guess, I'm just thinking it's all part of the budget. And with this idea, actually, Dr. Bonner, you mentioned like as a science teacher, how to embed reading in the content areas. Like I just thought about that a lot. Like as a teacher of kids that are learning how to read, like I learned how to do that. But if I were a physics teacher, that's not their specialty, but, or even what they're familiar with how to do. And yet we're asking how to do that. So I had written in my notes somehow from our previous meeting when we first got this, I wrote how to embed reading within the content areas. By June, we need to have a plan. Somebody, I said that, or sorry, in my head, or somebody said that. So that's like a goal that made it be like, okay, we don't have that exact plan now, but I thought that was a good goal, but I don't really know. Even though I can say I know about teaching reading, I don't know. And anyway, it's a huge thing for us to figure out, or teachers, I don't know. I just have a lot of notes about that concern on here because it's real. Also, this may be piddly, but I just want to say it, that I don't know if the term strong budget is like terminology that everybody uses when they're creating budgets, because like I Googled it and it's pretty common to use that. And it feels like a really unfortunate term, just because to me, it implies that the rest are weak, which may or may not really be the case, but that's the feeling that one gets just because words are powerful or whatever. So anyway, and the very last thing I wanted to say for right now anyway is, as a glass half full kind of person that I try to be, and again, this may not fit right here in this, I think it's something to keep in mind in this discussion is there's decreased enrollment. And what can we do as a school committee, as a community to increase that?
Recruit.
And, pardon me?
Recruit.
And I know that, I guess it was last year, when schools made their presentations and they made these nice videos. How to draw kids back. I just think it's something that we could have on our plate to do. To say, it's tricky because we don't, nobody wants to sound like it's denying that there are things to work on, but there are things that are great. I mean, all you have to do is go to the musical to say, look at the amazing things happening in Northampton Public Schools. It's not the only thing. It doesn't mean that there aren't things to work on, but we have to walk and chew gum at the same time and say, wow, come here, we're great. Look at all the things we can do together. So, in addition to improving. So that's what I just wanted to put out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Gazy.
I wanted to say, first of all, that the words of that East Hampton school counselor, Sam Hunter, really resonated with me. And I think that we have to take that onus off of them and really look at their needs. That's one thought. I was looking at the school profiles in our books because we've been hearing about inequity between the schools, and I was trying to compare things. And I got confused because, I think different schools call it different things. I've got Leeds and Ryan Road have specialists and support staff. Bridge and Jackson have service providers, interventionists, and special tech, and they all have tiered support of varying amounts. So it's very hard to compare. What I was, and also I have to admit that I'm waiting, this strong budget seems like something that is very important for our community. But then I listen to the economic realities, and that is also going on. And I'm in negotiations with the school, with the teachers and NACE, and, they have legitimate claims, but just to say that my comments here were based on sort of before the mayor spoke. And I was looking at the new personnel request for the strong budget. And there's Jackson Street has a big, long list, and Leeds and Bridge have smaller lists. And I was wondering, are the amounts for all, first of all, are all these included in the strong budget? And are the amounts approximately equal? Because it looks like there's more requests at Jackson or something, but so when you're divvying it up, do you give it equally to the schools, depending on their wish lists?
It's not quite that easy. Bobby, do you want to speak to that? Because it depends upon the staff, their salary.
I see, I always
mean,
forget
there's
the
just
step level.
It's
and
not
stuff.
as simple as when it comes to the money, it's not as simple as you think it is to say something about equal and equity.
Yeah.
So, Bobby, do you want to speak to the new personnel requests are in the strong budget. We preferred the word strong over dream.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay, all right. Bobby?
Yeah. Just, what's in the strong budget is what was requested by our administrative leadership team. And as far as dollars go, no, it wouldn't be the same depending on, what position they're hiring for. And again, as far as the overall budget goes, Dr. Bonner was correct. You can't say, if Bridge has $1 million and Jackson has 1.5, that there's a discrepancy between the two, because it could be that Jackson's hires were higher than Bridge Street's hires, if that makes sense. So they could have been hired with more experience, so they're hired higher on the step area, or they could have been hired with Masters plus 30 versus Masters. So there is a lot of discrepancies there. But as far as what was added to the strong budget, that was added as per the requests of the administrative leadership team.
And I will mention too, Bridge Street, which you do not see on here, did receive 2 additional paraeducators that they will maintain those positions. So you need to remember that piece as well.
And so if, like, principals at each of the schools got the marching orders to come up with what you need, and some people are like more willing to ask for pie in the sky when the opportunity is invented, and some people are sort of not so much. Would, when the final divvying up comes, would it all be, wouldn't just say, oh, here, Jackson, you have them all.
No.
Have everything. It would be a reordering and a paring down.
Correct. And remember what even though as traumatizing as last year's budget process was, that even when we had to determine which positions were to be cut, it was a conversation with Alt, and it was a back and forth, and there was also a lot of giving. And that was a conversation that happened amongst the administrators to determine what was actually going to be cut. And then there was some swapping out. So right away, depending on what you move forward and where we end up, will determine having those kinds of conversations of what do we really need? Where are we? Where can we trim?
Well, we've talked a lot about the elementary schools, but I have to give a plea for the middle and the high, because they have supported
Yes.
the elementaries for a long time, I think.
Yes.
For a while, rightly so, our high school was the flagship. And then I think in years past, when tough times came, because it was the flagship, it could, and the others were not, they were way behind. And so a lot of trimming was done for that. But, now the ones that are in, going into the high school are the ones, I believe, that have been some of the most severely impacted by the pandemic. My current 8th grade grandson was in 3rd grade when it hit and missed half of 3rd, all of 4th, and went back sort of. So to me, I think that we really need, if it comes down to nickels and dimes, we got to save some of that change for the high school.
Okay. So we're back, everyone's spoken once, right? Member Agnew, back to you.
A couple comments. What Member Davis said about attracting more students, which I think is a laudable goal, but there also is a population decline.
Yes.
We have to keep that in mind, and it's across the Massachusetts. So as much as we want to try to attract people, I think there is a smaller pool. The other thing you mentioned was the intervene our way out of this. That came up, and it was a quote from Rachel Nicholas. She said it in our curriculum and instruction subcommittee. And what she said was, she followed it by saying, so therefore adding more interventionists isn't the answer right now because it would be too many. And that's when she said we need to have that embedded practice of teaching reading at the same time as the content. That's what it, yeah. And that is a challenge, there's no question about it, to have people who are content deliverers having to teach reading at the same time. But I also just wanted to say, because the public comment that was in the February meeting, I believe, which was very intense and emotional and disturbing, and I think my words were quoted in a form letter that people sent around, that I was disturbed and I wouldn't forget what happened. I haven't forgotten all the stories. And I think that one of the things that is hopeful, if I may, a glass half full, is that the efforts that are being made by the special ed department or the student services department to kind of restructure, especially in the elementary schools, and having the training for the ESPs in RBT to address some of the issues that are confronting teachers and caregivers and ESPs. I hope those will mitigate some of the concerns that have happened this year. I think it's a good policy to think about having specialized paras. I also think that having a couple of in-district programs coming back is a good idea. I'm having experienced wins and had experienced the fact that we did have all of a sudden a lot of students who weren't receiving the support that they had before. I think it's really a good move to do that. And I also think, Member Miller, you were talking about the behavior stuff and the issues of students that I heard from Dr. Bonner that we were going to have professional development in restorative practices and in responsive classroom, especially because there are people who haven't had those trainings, especially the responsive classroom and probably second step. I'd like to put a plug in for that too, because that's our district health curriculum. And I do think that some of the moves that are being made to kind of restructure and make sure that everybody's got the training that they need in culture and climate, I would say, will help. I do think it will help. I know that the strong budget has all this more of this in it, but I think that we can also hope that that is something that won't go by the wayside, no matter what the decision is about the budgets, because it is, as I think somebody mentioned in public comment, that it's not only money. It is some kind of restructuring and attention to climate and attention to culture that can have an effect on student behavior. I know that that's true. So I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back around.
Yeah.
Member Stein.
Don't want to touch that mic. Just had a comment and then a question, follow up on the earlier question I had. And the comment is that me? The comment is, I hear a lot about declining enrollment. And when we look even at this presentation, we see at the state that it's slowly increasing. And we also see sort of projections that when we look into this budget don't seem to add up. Wild disparities between the roll-up projections for enrollment and what the middle school is telling us. And I think we're not really capturing what ends up happening at both the middle school and high school level in terms of students returning to the district for a variety of reasons. And if the economy does falter, more of the students will return. But I don't see and that frankly doesn't affect our funding because we're in hold harmless. So I don't really see how declining enrollment is the justification for further sort of dismantling the educational experience in the district, because you have no economies of scale in these tiny amount of numbers spread over 6 buildings. Like, you just don't. It never works that way. And I just want to say this is a moment of national crisis, and the ones that are always hurt the most are the most vulnerable. And our schools are disproportionately poor, disproportionately refugees, disproportionately students of color than our community is. And it's incumbent on us, if we really want to live up to our values, to think about what the overall budget of the municipality focuses on. And right now, I would argue there's no better place to shore up funding than the one universal public institution we have control of in this municipality. And that's our schools. It helps the most amount of people that are the most vulnerable to the current climate. And we should prioritize it. It should be one of our top priorities. And the budgets we're looking at, aside from the strong budget, are just totally inadequate to the moment and totally inadequate to any moment. And we can't recruit people back if we cut another 25, 26 positions. We can't recruit with PR and slideshows when people are leaving because of the experience, and staff are leaving because of these. We're going to lose a lot of good people if this continues. We already have. And we can't afford to lose them. So we really need to reevaluate what our priorities are in a crisis moment and really center the needs of the most vulnerable in our community, which are children, and especially children with no other means to do anything else. I know a number of children will be fine. They'll go to a private school, or maybe they'll get into a lottery for a charter that's somehow better for them. There's a lot of kids that are not going to be able to do that, and I'm worried about them. And I am also hopeful to a limited degree about the reorganization of some of these programs. I wish we had had a broader conversation about the philosophical and practical vision for them, because they are a retreat from an inclusion model that we've had that we haven't really wanted to talk about, what's gone wrong with it. But I have some hope for that, but you can't build a good culture, you can't build restorative practices when you have like no resources and no personnel and no morale. You just can't. We can say we are, but you can't do it. It doesn't work that way. My question really is to follow up on the amount of positions lost. I think that the superintendent accurately read my question and did give us at that meeting what we asked for. And my recollection of that meeting was that it was over $1.6 million that had to be trimmed. And looking at positions based on general ideas about them, it came down to a combination of 20 plus A and C units. I don't know which ones. I don't need to know which ones. And that the additional 5.78 was not included in that, so that the total number would be 25.8 plus that we would lose. Obviously, that could change based on which positions we're actually talking about. But this wasn't something that was fabricated or falsely trumped up. And I really think we need to be clear that that's what we're talking about. That's the kind of cuts we're talking about, and I don't know how we will survive that.
Member Labouty.
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of comments that I think I just would make one edit to members Agnes' statement around that the answer was not more interventionist, but it wasn't just more interventionist. It was, yes, she said that there needed to be more interventionists to handle this crisis moment in this place. And we had to figure out a bigger plan, because you can't just keep adding them, right? So it's both. It was and. So I wouldn't want us to think it was that it wouldn't do anything to add. But that's not the only answer, because you can't keep just doing that. So
Sorry if I...
no, I think I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
people understood in terms of what the message was just broader, because you have to do both. And I think what I'm hearing, or what everyone's hearing about the issue with Bridge, is that it feels like there's a disconnect between what we see asked and what we hear from the teachers and what we received in emails from what they felt that they had requested, maybe not in time for the principals to present things. So we keep hearing about it, but it didn't show up. And so I think that's the push and pull that I'm hearing. That's what feels like, when Member Gazy was saying, well, maybe it just didn't get asked for in the same way, but I think that's what we're hearing. And I think that's why we're all sort of uncomfortable, because I think we heard it, and yet we're not quite seeing it. So that makes us feel like, oh, am I missing something? So I think I just wanted to put that out there, because I think that's what I'm experiencing. And I think the final thing that I would say is, regardless of what budget comes about, I really, really think what Member Hennessy said about the word student needs to be the focus. That whatever we're doing, that's what we should be saying. is what is this doing for the students? So however we do it, that's what we need to focus on. That's my thing.
Okay, Member Hennessy, and then Member Hennessy.
Okay, I will try to keep it quick. I won't repeat. I had a similar comment about the interventionists. I guess I just want to say, as a teacher in a different district, what teachers say here resonates so much, and I actually can't articulate how different and difficult teaching is post-pandemic. I feel like I have 2 careers, 3. The beginning years, which were like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I was like doing it. And then I like got my groove on. It was like awesome. And then post-pandemic. And it's really hard as a teacher, and I think the Bridge Street teachers and other teachers have really communicated effectively, and yet they didn't even hit it. There's something so hard, and the needs of students are so great, and it's more than reading, except it is reading. It's more than social emotional, and it is social emotional. It's everything and a confluence of social media, a confluence of phones, and then we're tired, right? Teachers are tired, and administrators are tired. So this is all happening in an incredibly difficult world. And Rachel, so I'm a little extemporaneous, but I do have some notes. Rachel Mayuri said at the budget meeting, you guys have a lot of, what'd she say? You have a lot of responsibility, but not a lot of power. Yeah. And I was at home watching, because I'm so bored in my life. But I'm like, I kind of laughed, and then I was like, yeah. We do have a lot of responsibility and not a lot of power, and so it's really frustrating. And I don't, oh my God, I'm never going to run for mayor. That's not ever what I want to be. So I don't, like, tricky job, right? Like, on a good day. And so I keep going, like, to this, like, well, why can't we do this, or why can't we do this? But that's not my responsibility. That's not my job, right? It's like the city level. But I will say that this strong budget, like, our kids need it. And then then where I get is, I think we'll save money in the long run. I do. I think from interventionists and teaching us teachers who are high school teachers and middle school teachers how to embed reading and math differently in our classrooms, that's going to save us money in the future. Working, Dr. Bonner, you talked about SEI being great for all students, right? All of these things are great for all students, whether it's ML students, students with special needs. It just works, right? And it's going to save us money. And that's, so that's the economic part, but it's going to also save kids' lives and have a pathway to the future. And by no means am I saying that anyone who votes for a different budget is voting not to save kids' lives. That's not what I'm saying. I just think it's really that big that this is so important. So I don't know what we do. I just know when I look at this strong budget, it's what we need. I see Belchertown. I see even Hadley having a hard time. I see, it's all over. Chicopee, I know we're having a really hard time. I see it, and I don't know. I want our community. I want us to figure it out. Whether it's mobilizing to get a $6 million override in the spring, that seems like really crazy. But I think this is hard work. I appreciate we're all in here, and Mayor, I appreciate you're doing this work. I can't. I see the economic. I teach economics. I'm not an expert, but I know enough of it. This is super hard. So that's that. And my last thing. I'm sorry, I went way over what I said I would do. I do think, Member Davis, we do need, after this budget season, we have to commit to talking about how we. Whether, and I've already written to Dr. Bonner about, do we become an IB program? Do we have different schools doing bilingual? I don't know what it is, but like we've got to figure it out. Because I disagreed, Member Stein. I do think we're in a declining enrollment, but we have this huge population of students who go to charter schools and private schools that we could recruit to come back, and that will make us not hold harmless, but an increasing population. So. Those are just comments. I just appreciate all people in this room and the good work, and I appreciate your intentionality and concern. And I think my wife always says love. I'm not one of those people who says it all the time, but I think the love that we're bringing to this table. So, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Member Miller. back to you.
I'm just inspired by Member Hennessy and her comments because I have a bunch of those in my head that I want to say. So I think we're going to have to, at some point, whether it's this budget or beyond, there are going to be some very difficult decisions that I think are going to have to be made at some point. I don't know whether any of the working groups ever talked about closing, you're going to hate this, closing a school, combining schools, getting rid of one building. I look at the incredible increase in the costs of heating, gas, and electricity just for the buildings. And I'm not talking about staff, and I'm not talking about, but a building? Like, does anyone talk about getting rid of a building and consolidating? Or, I don't just, anyway, that's just one of my thoughts.
So Member Miller, that is a part of our strategic plan, and we literally just launched that working group last night. It's been a very busy year, and every time I tried to plan a meeting time, it was canceled. So last night, we did launch that, and a lot of conversation, a lot of thoughts, and I probably will, I will follow up with you, as well as Member Hennessy, who just, follow up with you about your thoughts, because those were two things that were discussed very briefly last night. So thank you.
So that was one of my radical thoughts. But, I also think about things like, would it save us money to do a little outside consultation with psychologists outside of the district, as opposed to hiring in-home? Getting consultation from psychologists that are expert at this. I don't know if that would save money, but I just think that at some point, maybe, we're going to have to cut some of the extras that people get. But I'd rather see that than seeing a loss of a teacher or, I think we're going to have to make some painful choices, although when I say that, I'm advocating for the strong budget. But I wonder if there's anything we can do to save a little money off of it, because we're in a dire situation. I guess that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Member Agna.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things that I'm not sure, Member Stein, you misinterpreted what I said, but I did, and I don't mean to be defensive, but when you said that talking about the declining enrollment is not an excuse for dismantling programs, I took that as what you suggested I said, which I did not. Okay, thank you. Just think about that. And also about the way you said that I was talking about the need for restorative practices and for the responsive classroom and the restructuring. Again, it would help me as a person who thinks about how people speak to say, those are good ideas, or those are really important, and we also have to think about the things, like Member Labonte said, and. It just feels uncollegial, and I just need to say that. Thank you.
Okay. Member Davis, we're back to you.
Yeah, so I wanted to clarify what I was saying as well, very briefly. And one of the things that I meant to say, many constituents have mentioned to me, this is the thing that I meant to say also before, is this idea of doing more with what we have, which I push against it a little bit too, sometimes if I'm feeling, because I think it can be spun into do without, and I don't, the way I hear it is like a creative thing, like a multi-age class. If it would help make 2 other classes smaller, which there's an art to teaching a class like that. That's not an easy thing to say. I'm going to have 2nd and 3rd graders in my classroom, but there's a way to do that. I remember growing up as in the elementary school that is now knocked down, that I grew up in, was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and there started to be like 5th, 6th class and stuff like that. And but I guess I wanted to, Member Stein, I am not a Pollyanna. I never would say that we can recruit with PR and slideshows. I'm just saying, I remember that we did that, and it was lovely, and it made everybody feel great about, oh my gosh, look what they're doing at JFK. And nobody's going to want to come back here if it's 100% doom and gloom. It's both. And that's all I was trying to say. And that's all I was trying to say. I'm not, all sunrise and roses. Ask my family. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to Member Stein, and then.
I have a question for Bobby, but just a few comments first. Yeah, I'm sorry that Member Agnew felt it was uncollegial. I certainly didn't mean to imply that she didn't know the difficulty in laying those out. Or I guess my comment was more in general than to what you said. But I similarly get frustrated when I hear from people that we should do with less, like Member Davis said, and my frustration with that is twofold.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
No, I didn't say, no, Member Davis, frustration when she hears that. I was saying I shared that same frustration when I hear that. Not Member Gazy, Member Davis. And I'm saying I share the frustration that she hears when she hears those things. So, and what frustrates me about it is it assumes that all of the talented staff we have don't know how to already every day make really difficult, complicated decisions on how they're best going to deliver services and take care of students, which I think they're doing all the time. So it sort of like treats them as if they don't have professional judgment or agency, which I find very frustrating. And the other is that there's just some obvious either waste or mismanagement or like lack of knowledge on how to actually improve things that's the problem, and it's not actually resources, which I continue to see no evidence for. And on this point, like at our last meeting, on a similar vein, I asked the superintendent when she says yes or no, or talks about staff efficiencies, to actually outline like, okay, what are the things that are non-monetary, money allows us to get staff and training, all these sorts of things we need. What are those things that could be amended and have an improvement? And I got no answer, because I don't think there is an answer. And yet that echo of we need to do more with what we have continues to reverberate. And I find it really insulting to the district. I know that if there were things that could have been done differently that didn't require money, the superintendent and the principals already would have done it. So it really feels frustrating to me, and I don't like that dismissal. And it feels very right-wing to me, right? Which is that public schools can't do anything right. They need to be dismantled. They need to be given profit mode, all these sort of things you hear from the right all the time. But my question really is around the utilities costs. We have a raise on, we talked about this last year, we have a raise on Ryan Road, we have a raise on Bridge Street that we got through some sort of program. The city itself has bought into a raise in the Berkshires. How are our net metering and our usage rates, how are they flowing? What are we saving from having the raise on those buildings? What sort of rate gets distributed to city-owned properties from city-owned infrastructure elsewhere? How does this all get balanced? Are we paying the same rate as every other municipal office? Like, how does any of this work? I had some conversations with the capital director's predecessor right before they left, but like I still don't really have a sense of what the arrays we have are giving us in terms of budgetary relief and how the net metering works and how the charges across the city with the other broader credits are flowing either. And I don't know if you can help me, Bobby.
Well, I can say I have been provided with information around that, and I could share it out at a later date. I don't have it tonight with me. I can say the net metering line did not increase. So there is a charge, as you know, and I believe they hold it within like maybe 2 or 3 different companies that I saw last, and I could be wrong, but that's how I saw it. And it is broken out between all the different departments. So it is definitely charged, I believe, appropriately. So whatever city side versus school side, we are charged appropriately from what I have seen. But I don't have a lot of those answers right now, other than I have reviewed them, but briefly, not really in depth.
Do you have a sense? Do you have a sense for, at least for the arrays on Ryan Road and Bridge? Do those just provide metering relief for those schools directly, or how does that work?
No, I think they provide an overall, and then it's divvied up, but I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Because I don't know what the contract looks like with the companies that we pay. So in other words, you'll see the line in the budget, there's a net metering line in addition to your electric line. And I will say, I don't have a really good knowledge of that. I rely on the CAPA department for that. But they have definitely provided information so that it looks like, we are being appropriately charged.
Thank you.
And we can talk about that probably more in budget and property if you want, and I could get CAPA perhaps to come and explain some of that.
Great, thank you.
Close to wrapping up.
Yes, I think so. All right, we still have executive sessions.
Right.
Sorry?
Sorry, I'm excited.
Wow. Okay.
Member Hennessy said we might break a record tonight, and I thought, let's do it.
Okay,
Sorry.
so, and we covered the other items on the agenda. So is there any further discussion? Member Sarvikock? Nope. Zero there. Okay. So if there is not, then does someone want to make a motion to go into executive session? And I think, yes, Cassie.
So what's the process now? Are we going to be meeting on April 2nd, or?
That's true. We should have a discussion about whether.
We need to or not.
And that date was April 2nd at, what time?
I believe it's April 2nd.
5:30 is what I have held, but.
Okay.
Otherwise, the next meeting will be the
April
10th? 10th. April 10th.
I don't know how to think about it, right? So it sounds to me, from what I'm hearing, that the body is more seemingly publicly, what has been said, aligned with the strong budget. I guess what I'm wondering is how much specificity we need to know about the cuts on the 4% before we vote on the 10th versus what we would have to know after. Like last time, we you know, it rolled on for quite a while. So I don't know. I don't have a strong sense one way or the other. Like, what do we need to know beforehand? And do we need to have another meeting to know it before we get together or not? I mean, I don't know.
Do you have another budget property before?
No.
No, it's right. It's like the Monday, I think, after.
After the 10th?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's like.
Is there one on the 31st? No?
No.
No,
And
There's not one on the 7th.
recording in
no.
progress.
I think it's the following week, but I could be wrong.
Let's see. Actually, yeah, you're right, it's the 14th, so we could make it the 7th.
We can move it up if you're all
We
available.
could move it up to the 7th, and then, if you can do that time.
There's a talk at the high school of cell phones that night,
Oh, that's right.
but
Oh, yeah.
that doesn't start till 7, I think.
Yeah, there's an event, and then I have, going to that event, for one, and then there's,
Me too. Me too.
Street School.
And can I ask, if we were meeting the 2nd, is that in addition to the 10th or instead of?
In addition.
In addition to?
Yeah. The 10th is the regular meeting.
That's right, and that stays the same. Okay.
So the purpose of the second would be to take a vote then on the budget?
It certainly could have a possible vote on it.
Okay.
Sounds like we could do the 7th as another, we could move up the budget and property meeting a week. I guess we could do that there and then do the 10th and forego the 2nd.
Can't
If
do
people
that
are
the
comfortable
2nd.
with that, yeah.
Yeah, I can do the 7th, but I can't do the 2nd.
Dr. Bonner,
I'm not available on the 7th.
You're
I've
not?
already committed myself, so.
Okay, so if it's not the 7th,
We could do it the 7th if we get the materials ahead of time. That's another option.
What materials are we talking about?
or, well, I don't know if there's.
More specificity, is that what you were
Yeah,
asking for?
more specificity on the 4% cuts.
So here we go again. So what exactly does that look like? Because we already talked about this. Do you want me to actually name positions for you for that 4% cut? That's what I need to know. Is that the work that you want done between now and the next time you meet? Because that's specificity. That means looking at the positions that we have, naming the positions, looking at those who have tenure levels, deciding who actually would be cut, and getting their salary so that we can figure out what that gap is. Is that what you all are asking Bobby and I to do? Because that's a process, and that's a conversation that I always have. I've only been here for a year, but at least the union can say that I did that with you last year. I at least shared with you, these are the potential cuts. In a week's time, for me to meet with the alt team to determine that. Is that what this body is asking me to do? Because that's what the word specificity means to me. Maybe I'm misinterpreting. Is that what you're asking me to do? And I just need to know if that's what you're asking me to do.
I have my
and
hand
that's-
up. I don't know if anybody can see that.
No, sorry,
Yeah,
we
so
can't
I
see
want to
it.
make sure, because if that is the case, that will unleash panic in this district. I want to be very clear as to what you are asking me to do.
Okay, let's see if Member Seraphy Cox, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I do not want that specificity.
Thank you.
I think that the only time that specificity will be at all relevant is when the mayor is deciding, my assumption is that this body is not going to vote in favor of I'm going to call it the 4% budget. It's only a 4% increase in the local allocation, not actually a 4% increase in the school's budget. But I'll call it the 4% budget. So I don't anticipate that this body is going to vote in favor of that. So I don't think that we need that kind of specificity for our vote. I think that the mayor will need some kind of specificity like that when she's deciding whether or not she is going to put, whatever budget we pass into her budget or the 4% increase. And then also it would be relevant when city council discusses, after we pass our budget. But I don't feel like there is a possibility that this body is going to pass that budget. So I don't want to see it. And I remember that process. And I think that process would be premature at this time.
Okay, member sign.
I tend to agree with Member Sarah Cox. I guess my hesitation or my sort of questioning of what the best way to go forward is, I thought we heard very strongly tonight that the 4% is what's going to end up happening. So if that's the case, I think the sooner we know what that means, the better it is for the community to know. Because if it's the case that 45 days before the end of the fiscal year, the beginning of the next fiscal year, it's out and no one knows what that actually means, how can the community weigh in on the impact of that budget? Right? So like they're hearing for the first time probably tonight from us, if they didn't watch Budget and Property Subcommittee meeting, that it's a significant amount of cuts. And so understanding what those cuts mean for their schools is important. And as chaotic as it was last year, I think they had a right to know. Because how do you vote for a budget if you're in a city council if you don't actually know what it means?
I don't mean to interrupt you, Mike. I'm just wanting to make sure to clarify. So it sounds like to me what you're saying is that you would like to see it at some point. You agree that it doesn't need to happen by the time of our vote necessarily, but that, say, later on in April.
I guess I just don't know when else we're going to meet, right? Because then we're into May with meeting. It's like everything is going to roll forward and it'll be mid-May,
But if we're not voting on the budget, like if we're not going to vote in favor of the 4% budget, then it's a projection of what would happen. But of course, until the city council ultimately passes whatever final budget gets passed, then it would come back to us to determine what particular cuts would happen. So it would be a projection.
Can I say something?
Let me go to member Weisenfeld and then to you, okay?
So I don't feel like I need a lot more information. I think from the perspective of a school committee member, I know enough about what I think is the right thing to do, putting students at the center and giving some help to schools and children that are overly stretched and really hurting. The bigger problem is how we're going to operationalize whatever it is we vote on, right, at the city council, and how we're going to make it work. But from my perspective as a school committee member whose responsibility it is to think about the schools and the needs of the children and making sure that everybody's getting at least adequately served, I don't feel like I need more information before I take a vote. So I don't know what we're talking at this point. I think the real difficulty is going to be operationalizing what is the right thing to do for schools.
Member Miller.
I think you just said what I was about to say, which is I thought that tonight as a school committee member, I was going to vote on what I think is the right thing for the schools and for the children and for the teachers. And I thought that was what, as a school committee member, I would vote on. I didn't think that was the end of it. I thought that then we would vote on whatever we decide and forward that to the city council. They might do something very different, and then we'll have to deal with that. But I wasn't planning on voting tonight on, I mean, I do recognize the reality. I know that we're going to end up closer to 4%, but not right now. Right now, I was planning to vote on what I believe as a school committee member is right for the schools. That's what how I was going to vote today. If we were voting, I thought we were just discussing. So
We're just discussing.
We're not voting.
Mm-hmm.
Member LaBounty.
I think we should just meet on the 10th. I don't think I need another meeting right now. I mean, I think we can have more questions. I think we can email questions in the meantime to have them come for things that you still have outstanding. And, but I don't think we need another whole meeting to do this. That's my vote.
Member Stein, is your hand up again?
Yeah, the piece that I'm trying to figure out too is how do we know when to trigger layoff notices for May 1st? So if we end up passing a strong budget in a week and a half, but what we're hearing right now is that that is likely not going to be incorporated. And contractually, we're supposed to tell our staff May 1st about layoffs, pink slips. Like, how are we going to figure out who is getting those when they're going out? Like, how does that process jive with the, we voted for this and we're going to wait till the 15th of May when we are ostensibly being told now there's going to be layoff? Like, that's the part I can't reconcile, and I don't know what the right thing to do is.
Well, maybe that's a question, right, for the superintendent and the mayor.
Oh, I know. So, so what has been the role in the past is that HR and administration determines that and gets those slips out.
But I guess the question is, how will you know what to do when we voted for one budget and a new budget hasn't been presented yet officially that has a number in it?
So
How will you
just-
know how much to reduce by to send out layoff notices?
So just like we did last year when we received our number from the mayor when she does her presentation, at that time we send out a potential pink slip at that time. We'll do what we did last year.
Is that after the first?
There is the contract, if I believe in this district, that there's a certain time frame and it's not May 1st. It's a little later. We have our non-renewals that are coming out on the 15th of the month, layoffs, but then the actual contract language, I believe it's 60 days prior, 30 days. I have to double check the contract. So we'll follow the contract, and I work with HR to get that done. And we'll begin to have the conversations about priorities of what we're maintaining and where we can cut. We'll begin those conversations. We will not wait.
So just to clarify, there'll be conversations between you, but depending on when the date is, right? If it's 60 days and it's May 1st and the presentation hasn't been made, there will be conversations between you and the mayor's office about what the actual budget is going to be.
No, correction, that's not true. It will be between myself, Bobby, and the alt team in terms of what potential layoffs we will need to do in order to meet a 4% increased budget. The other concern is that we still do not know our COLAs. That's going to be a real hard situation to anticipate. So,
Okay, can we go into executive session?
Are we there yet? Can I
Yeah.
make a motion?
Make the motion.
I move to go into executive session per MGLC 30A 21A3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares.
Motion's been made by Member Hennessy, seconded by?
I'll second.
Member LaBounty, and Chair does so declare. So we will be adjourning from executive session and not coming back into open public session. So we will say goodnight to everyone who's still here. And roll call, please, Cassie.
Member Sarah Cox? Member
Yes.
Stein?
Yes.
Member Hennessy?
Yes.
Member Miller?
Yes.
Member LaBounty?
Yes.
Member Agna?
Yes.
Member Davis?
Yes.
Mayor Shara?
Yes.
Member Gacy?
Yes.
Member Vice Freund?
Yes.
I think it's easier to just end